couple examples. So did anyone choose to write an SBR for the reinforcing statement for ADIA? We're good at that, right? How about the redirecting? Did anyone choose to? There we go, for that redirecting question. The one I'm looking at it, deadline. You already talked to him once.
Redirecting one. In group 3, we used that one.
Okay. So
we had someone who they were given a task to do and they missed the deadline once and then they missed it again. So we decided to go with the redirecting because their time, I guess, to correct the situation was coming up. So we explained to them how it affects the operation, and we asked them to give us to ask us or to tell us what they need in order to accomplish the task. Like if they need extra time or resource, we don't have time, but whatever else we can do. And that we noted that their behavior seemed like it was not connected to the mission.
I love that. You anchored it into your values. I think that's one I recognize there. Thank you. Did anyone come up with one of their own, a doozy that they want to share? Javier gave us a great example there, but sometimes it's fun. All right, so you have the feedback model. You're good to go, right? Off you go. Just give all those feedback conversations and you've got the model. So what could possibly be stopping you at this point from having any challenges or qualms about a feedback conversation? Oh yeah, we haven't at all addressed that there's another person involved here. So the self-awareness and self-regulation in the world is going to get us really to, really far along where we want to be. But we also, the best communicators, just like you learned in communicating to influence, you're going to anticipate how your audience may feel about this message. In this case, your audience is the person that you're going to be talking to. So what can you watch for, or what can you think about as you've got, this nice, concise statement that you can use to communicate what you saw and why it matters? What are some things that you can do ahead of time to set up success so you get less defensiveness from the person that you're seeking to engage with? Basically, look for a lot of the same stuff you see in yourself. You're probably not going to be able to notice their stomach tightening or their palms sweating because that is a very different webinar altogether. You should not be holding hands with your feedback people. But you might notice a jaw clenching. Usually you'll notice something like this. You've upset me when I go from this to yep. Okay. So your folks, right? Pay attention. You can start to identify signals that safety is at risk. The best communicators anticipate their response ahead of time and try to address them before they arise. And the master skill here is to share your intention. When we were figuring out different stories, we were really figuring out what might be some different intentions. So the car driving down the road, the intention could be to ruin my day. The intention could also be to get the ice cream in the freezer. We don't know what it is. We only have someone else's behavior to go on. And we can't count on everybody else questioning whether we have a good intention or not. So what you want to recognize is that the other person does not know your intention unless you tell them. So instead of just jumping into, you need to do this differently, you might say something like, hey, you know what, we're business partners and I want us to do this together. In our example, it would be, I am concerned about how we're doing on meeting deadlines and I want us to be successful, so can we talk about that? That part about, I see you as my business partner and I know that we work really well together, all of us think that, but if you say it, you're gonna really put that lizard brain at rest. So that is one of the skills of master communicators in challenging conversations. If you wonder why some people are great at it, almost all of us, oh my gosh, almost all of them have figured out how to state my intention first. I showed you this earlier. I don't want you to feel like you need to do this perfectly. I want you to have a chance to practice, and it's fine if you get it wrong. So be thinking about ahead of time, how might this person misinterpret my intention, and how can I signal ahead of time? Not a 30-minute like dissertation on everything you're feeling, but a simple statement of, hey, I really love getting to partner with you. Can we talk about how we're communicating on our deadlines? That is a completely different thing to hear than, hey, can we talk about how we're communicating on our deadlines? It's one little sentence. It's not even a whole sentence. I like to partner with you. So don't underestimate the incredible power of just making sure you explicitly say that you have a good intention. We don't tend to assume that other people do, and we learned that in the stories part. So having the conversation. Now, these pieces that I'll be sharing with you, I'm happy to, you'll have the recording, I'm happy to share these slides so you can refer back to them. The reason I want to show you this next section is because it's going to help you be more successful with your takeaway, with your optional take-home assignment, which is a preparation worksheet for your candid conversation. So be thinking about your own story and where might some of these tips be helpful. But again, right now, we're not going to have you go through this in-depth journaling experience because this is a really personal situation. Usually the ones we're avoiding are the ones that are really tough. So when it comes to having the conversation, there's some things that we can do. Here's a framework, and you're going to notice that SBR fits right within it. So we just talked about explaining your intention, and then you give the situation and the behavior, the facts. Then you share what your perceptions are. This is the result when it's coming to, I'm starting to feel like, or I'm starting to tell myself that you're missing deadlines because you don't care about the project. Invite theirs. Can you help me better understand this? This is the assumption, and you're better off assuming and being wrong in this situation, I assure you. You're much better off assuming that someone has a perfectly valid explanation for what happened. And so go in with that assumption. Hey, I see this as really good partners, and I want us to keep working together. I've noticed that you've missed the past few deadlines, and I didn't get a note from you in enough time for me to pull an all-nighter. It makes me feel like you're either don't value our partnership as much, or there's something else going on. Could we talk about what's going on, or could we talk about that? This is how you bring someone in to tell their story. You're role modeling first. This is the positive intent that I have. Here's the situation. Here's what I've observed. Here's how I'm interpreting that. Here's the story I'm telling myself. Just pick one. You don't have to tell them all 18 stories you've come up with. And then assume and communicate the assumption that you're missing something. And you'd like for them to be able to have a dialogue with you as well. Of course, once they start talking, you need to use your emotional intelligence skills. You need to listen. You need to empathize. And we saw how quick that switched. The difference between being a jerk driver and getting ice cream in the freezer, whole different response and empathy reaction. Now, when it comes to mutual purpose and mutual respect, these are relatively advanced. All we're really talking about here are remembering we're all on the same side. So even though sometimes Laura, Lacey, and I have the most opposing opinions about how to do something ever, we know, or we remind each other, you know what? The reason we care so much is we're all on the same side. So that's just kind of that thing that you can remind people. And someone else hit this already, close with commitment. When you're doing follow-up feedback, you've already told this person once and given them feedback on the missed deadline. It's really helpful to close your conversation with, now let's talk about who's going to do what, how will we follow up, and what does accountability look like? This helps you when you need to come back and have the same conversation again, because you've already discussed, if it happens again, let's think about what will happen and what we need to do. And this, this is definitely going to apply when you're moving into the more intense performance management conversations. But really, if you take the opportunity to just make sure the person you're talking to knows that you have good intention, give them facts, not stories. I saw you roll your eyes versus you were annoyed and rude. the door closed really quickly versus you slam the door in a temper tantrum, right? So facts that you observe, let them know how you're interpreting them, but share it as a story, not a fact. This is my perception, not the whole perception. So here we go. Thank you, Laura. You're flying me through. I did forget that I wanted to do this. So you can share your facts. Then you're going to share your story, which we've already looked at a little bit. Explain your position. This is tentative, and there's some examples for you there. You're also then going to invite them to dialogue. So a lot of this, I drained my slides early, but here's the stuff I was talking about with inviting folks to dialogue. Ask them open-ended questions. Prime the pump if they aren't talking. So it might sound like this when I'm talking with one of my kids. Hey, what's going on at school? How you doing? Fine. I'm fine. I hear that, but it just seems like you've been extra stressed out lately. Can we talk about it? Are you sure everything's fine? That's what you're doing here. Not everybody's going to tell you right away that they're mad at you. So you want to stay at that conversation if that's the case and remind them, I really do want us to work through this. Then you're going to stay engaged in that dialogue. And this is where you're listening, empathizing. You may summarize what they're saying. You're really doing those active listening skills while you're engaging there. And then that's perfect. And all your problems disappear. What this gives you is a different way to think about, really, to think about crucial conversations. What I'm going to do before I open it up for your questions, to talk a little bit more about what you wanted to learn about that I didn't cover yet. We'll see what we can do there. Questions, maybe not answers. What I'm going to invite you to do, it is optional, but you did receive, and Laura, I think already put the link in, but Laura, if you can make sure that link for their worksheet. It's a very personal activity. I'm not going to have you do it with people together here, but there is a one-page worksheet that I use when I realize I'm avoiding a tough conversation or when I know it's going to be rough. I may not spend hours on this. Over time, as you start to think about and prepare for your tough conversations by considering these things, now I just do it on the fly. Now I already think ahead of time on, okay, I have to say something. What's going to set them off? How do I like get ahead of that? And I know I'm going to want to win this conversation, but ultimately I need this person on my side. All right, boom, and away you go. So you get there, but this worksheet is one you can use over and over and over. You can delete it right away. It's up to you. I just find that having a chance to really sit down and collect my thoughts helps me, if nothing else, feel more confident going into a conversation. So I want you to feel free to take that, complete it, or don't. Well, let's first find out that ends the prepared content. I want to hear from all of you. What questions do you have? What's some stuff that you got to talk about in breakout groups that I didn't ask you about, but you want to share? What are your yeah buts? Well, this sounds great, Sarah, but you don't know my husband or my wife. You're right, I don't, but I do know people.
As people are thinking, I do want to bring us back to Javier's question that he had at the beginning. And so this, the question he asks is, if we know if different cultures engage more readily in these candid conversations, if this is just something that comes second nature. For me personally, if I'm looking at my family and my in-laws, I can tell you yes, because my in-laws just right away. But if we're thinking outside and looking at the different cultures, different countries, do you have any data? We might have to, I know, probably do some research on that one, but I didn't know if you had studied any of that in all the millions of books that you read.
So I don't have the data off the top of my head, but here's just my hot take response. Don't quote me on it, but I like to just, whatever comes through, let me share it. First of all, if you want the data, a lot of this comes from an organization called Vital Smart, and they have a book called Crucial Conversations. This is not exactly Crucial Conversations, but that's the book I read that completely changed everything about the way I think about conversations and doing hard things. You can check Vital Smarts for the research. I know that they are a global organization. I don't know that it's so much down to culture as it is down to how things are done within a culture. So in a more direct culture, I might jump into the conversation right away with my SBR. In a more indirect culture, I may spend about 15 minutes just settling into the conversation. The culture may change who it's appropriate to give feedback to and get it from. This is just me making it up though. That's just my sense of these skills apply to humans, but they're going to definitely be used within the context of the culture. It's a really insightful question. What else?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm actually really glad that we had this talk today because I had a situation with one of my team members this morning where I asked them to write a report, and when I went to go see it, it was very clear to me that I asked them to check the cost of something, but they put the cost code, and so in the table it just looked like everything costs $6,000. So I didn't look at it directly until this morning, but then I thought, okay, if this person filled this out, like if he was actually paying attention or if he cared, like he would have noticed this. So I definitely was like annoyed, but I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, how do I have the conversation with him without just saying like, hey, I saw you do this. Were you just not paying attention? Like, I don't want to say that, but what would be like a more, like a better way to frame it?
Yeah, so I'd run through, one, what kind of relationship do I want long-term with this person? That's my biggest priority for how I'm going to engage. If I'm never going to see him again, I'm not putting all this time into it. I'm just say it, right? Like this is for those really important discussions. So I would be thinking about first, kind of prime myself with what do I ultimately want long-term in this relationship? What matters most to me? And then I would start with my intention. Well, first I would give myself at least 2 other explanations, even if I know they're wrong, right? It could be that, I don't know Excel enough, right? But it could be that cell had an old formula in it that did a copy paste across a bunch of other things. It could be that the column is in a different spot and they were running a macro. It could be that they're just not paying attention and don't care. You get yourself into that more curious state and then say, you know, hey, Sarah, do you have a second? I got your report and thank you for getting it in. I noticed that the cost center is in the part where I need the cost. So 2 things. 1, I need you to take a look at it and get the costs in so I can send it in. And 2, I just want to make sure there's not something going on with the form that's going to cause this to be, you know, and I'm making up a lot of these details, but it really is, I really appreciate our partnership. Thank you for getting me this information. I noticed something in it, and I'm wondering if there's something wrong with the form or if you can let me know. And then also, okay, now that I better understand, I need you to correct it and get it back to me by date. Very direct. The big difference is I value our partnership, and there's probably a reasonable explanation.
Super, thank you.
Yeah. What else? Other questions, other scenarios?
Hi, can you hear me? Sarah?
Yeah.
This has all been super helpful. Thank you so much for providing this. This is just more of a reflective thought I had. I think when we were talking about just at the onset of the difficult, tough conversation or issue, we either fall into the 3 buckets, either fight, flight, or freeze. And I don't know if I feel like I fit into either 3 of those categories, simply because I really truly take time to just internalize and process in that moment, like at the onset of like difficult conversation or trauma. I really do take that moment to internalize, what did they just say? No, I heard that wrong. And then at that moment, after like pausing, reflecting, pausing for poise is what I call it. Like that's my mental thought process. I'm pausing, and I then choose to react, respond, or what have you. Yeah. But I don't know if like in the initial onset of the of the issue if I really fall into either. And so I guess I'm asking, is there room for like an in-between or middle ground? Like, do you have to fall into either of those three buckets?
Yep, there's room for everyone and everything in my world. So here's what comes to mind when I'm thinking about that. I think you are still having your fight, flight, or your avoid and approach reaction, but it's happening in an instant, and you've built the skill of catching yourself between observing something, telling yourself a fight, flight story. It sounds like you've built your self-awareness to where you can jump in the moment you realize, wait, what story am I telling myself about this? So I think that as human beings, we're still going to have that fight, flight, etc. And that's how that's what gives us that moment of, wait, because there's got to be something, right, that makes you stop and say, wait, what did they just say? So it's whatever's happening to cue you to that. The goal, the end wonderful goal, is to have no time lapse between observing and checking your story. That's the ultimate goal for a crucial conversation, is to do them real time. This is so important in case you're sitting there like, oh crap, I have gone and blown it. You can have 1,000 do-overs. We teach in our inclusion training, it is not whether or not you mess it up, it's how you recover. So you can have just screamed and lost. I mean, it's not okay, right? But we're people, and the world is really hard right now, let alone in general. You can realize, and this happens a lot in your personal relationships, I might go back later that day and say, you know what, I was so stressed out this morning, and the way I responded to your question, it just wasn't okay. That's not what I want for our relationship. Can we have a do-over? So you can go back and repair. You are better off doing it horribly. I mean, not try to do it horribly, but in my opinion, you're better off doing it and getting it wrong and trying again than you are not doing it. You can't do this perfectly because you don't have control over what the other person does. You have no idea what I'm going to throw back at you when you engage in that conversation. So I hope that you'll experiment with them. I gave you the form too. You don't actually have the conversation to practice what you would do, and give yourself a chance to experience that mindset. And I do see that we're at time, so I want to be respectful for anyone who has that hard stop or needs to go. Hard stop is our vernacular. I'm happy to stick around for any other questions. Otherwise, I just, on behalf of myself, Laura, Kathy, all of us here at Farmers Insurance, wow, I'm so impressed that your organization is taking this time and that you're opting in to grow yourselves. Please celebrate the fact that you just devoted 90 minutes of your very precious time to pausing and learning how you can continue to be a better leader. Thank you so much. You made this very fun for me.
Well, Sarah, thank you, and Laura, thank you so much. Really awesome session. I recorded it, so